and economic development, and he received recognition from FEMA in disaster management. Where were you 2 weeks ago? Now you can make all the jokes you want about that, but I'm willing to bet had he been in the Gulf States a few weeks ago, things would have been very, very different. Harvey can be heard on the radio station, KLOA, with his weekly commentary, and of course is a friend of the media. I remember our sessions with him every other week in his office when he would gather for his media briefing, and of course he bribed the media with coffee and donuts. But I can say I appreciated his cooperation with the media and have been looking forward to hearing him speak tonight. So please welcome City Manager Harvey Rose.
Ray, if you were here for 16 years, you knew 15 city managers. Ladies and gentlemen, I first learned about freedom not from school, but at the side of my father, as he told me stories about his life in his homeland. At the beginning of the 20th century, he was born in a small village 300 miles south of Kiev in the Ukraine. He was born to a man who had fought in the Russo-Japanese War and was one of the few to survive in his regiment and return to the family grocery store. As my father went through his teens, civil war raged around the village in Russia. He told me the story one day when a man ran into the family store. He knew that that man had talked against the government, and the man was followed quickly by two armed soldiers. The soldiers forced my father, grandfather, and this man into the yard behind the store, where my father was forced to dig a shallow grave. And the man was executed without trial, without further muss. And my father and grandfather buried him in the backyard. Well, my grandfather had heard about a country called the United States and about the freedoms that were available in that country. And he wanted desperately to see his family moved to the United States. One by one, the family set out across Europe. My father, at age 16, walked across Europe, performing odd jobs to make enough money to fund his passage on a tramp steamer to Canada. He could not enter the United States. He didn't have the necessary paperwork. So as he entered Canada, he became an indentured servant, which is a polite term for slave labor, on a farm in the far northern regions of Canada. For 2 years, he survived in a cold wooden shack in the freezing northern portions of Canada, until finally he was able to enter the United States legally. My mother's family came from Lithuania during this time. They too were seeking freedom. And my parents met, married, and I was born a first-generation American. Now, unfortunately, with many first-generation Americans, they tend to be a little ignorant of freedom. They don't know what their parents had to go through. Well, in my case, as I went through school and started learning about history and the United States and freedom and liberty, my parents would take me every evening and ask me to tell them, to describe to them what I had learned that day, so that we learned together about liberty in the United States. We learned of the delegates to the 1787 Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, who began working on what would become the United States Constitution. They grasped that a great democracy must be built on the foundations of national consent to a federal government and respect for individual rights. After more than 2 centuries of continual cultural, legal, and economic change, our unique experiment in self-government was born successful witness to the genius and timeless wisdom of our founding fathers. Throughout America's history, in times of turmoil and peace, liberty and oppression, our faith in the Constitution's promise of freedom and democracy has been a steadfast rock of national stability against the raging seas of political change. The convention delegates ratified the Constitution on September 17, 1787, and submitted it to the states for approval. After much deliberation and discussion, 2 concerns emerged from among those who feared the Constitution's proposed centralization of federal power, the threat of tyranny and the loss of local control. To address these fears, our founders amended the Constitution by adding a Bill of Rights. These 10 amendments provided a series of clear limits on federal power and a litany of protective rights for its citizens. This set our national course on a route that would eventually enhance and expand individual rights and liberties. Today, our nation celebrates not only the oldest working written Constitution in world history, but also the enduring commitment to pursue a more perfect union as abolitionists, suffragists, and civil rights activists successfully seeking constitutional amendments that have strengthened the protections provided to all Americans under law. In so doing, we have rendered the moral resolve of our nation stronger and clearer. To continue this legacy, each of us must recognize that we bear a solemn responsibility to promote the ideals of freedom and opportunity. We each should serve our nation by actively supporting and shaping our government's institutions, by working together to build strong communities, and by loving our neighbors. Doing this will ensure that the American dream will become real for every willing citizen, and in fulfilling this call together, we will honor the spirit of our powerful and enduring Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, my father thanks you, my mother thanks you, and I thank you.
And I thank you, Harvey. Thank you very much. And I want to thank all of our speakers, our distinguished speakers, for being here tonight, especially those that did come from long distances. It was certainly a pleasure to be here. We're going to close tonight with Larry Costner is going to be singing God Bless the USA. I've been looking forward to hearing that. And it's wonderful being here, and I see a lot of friends out in the audience. Hi, Louie. Yeah, there he is. I'll talk to you afterwards, okay? And thank you so very much for coming, folks, and supporting this.
Mm-hmm.